Happy Sunday, my people. It's good to be here. I'm feeling good, feeling great today. And I'm happy and excited to be starting the Software Sundays series. So for this series, I want to be going deep into talking about tech and software engineering and AI and all the other tools and technologies that are going to define the next decade and even maybe the next 100 years. So, as many of you know, I've been a software engineer for the past 5 years. I've worked with Fortune 500 companies to help them develop their systems, mission critical applications that drove business operations, automated certain business functions from finance and tax calculations to developer experience operations. And I want to kind of peek into that experience with this series and just talk a little bit about, my insights from my experience as a developer and some of the conversations that I've been having with others inside of the software and technology industry. So I've spoken to a few, founders. I've spoken to people in tech sales, and the conversations and the ideas that I'm hearing are things that I just feel like should be shared to other members of our community. So with that being said, let's get started.
When do you need to pivot in a project or task?
So when you're thinking about pivoting in your project or pivoting from one project to another project, I would say it's key to understand why did I start this project, and if it hasn't become clear that whatever the premise was that kind of made me feel like this project was possible, have I, proven that it's no longer true? So if you're starting on a new company or you're thinking that this solution or this product that you're building is going to solve the problem that you had imagined was so important when you first started that venture or launched that venture, if you're deciding that it's time to pivot, you really need to make sure that you understand, what has changed. Has anything changed in the environment? Has anything changed in the technology that's possible? Maybe the competition. Are there more competitors? Are there less competitors? Is the solution that you've described or that you expected to be the solution? Have you tested it and found out, hey, the market is not considering this an appropriate solution? If you've done that research and you put in the time and put in that effort to figure it out, and then you found out, hey, the direction that I'm going in is really not the best for where I want to be, either long term or it could be short term. Of course, you don't want to make too many short term strategy pivots. You do want to have a clear direction on where you want to go and where you want to be, and do everything in your power to make sure you are following in that direction. But you may notice something, maybe even amongst your resources, might have changed. So at that time, hey, I need to transition. I need to pivot from where I was thinking earlier in the year to where I am now. Maybe your team size grew. Maybe you're noticing something inside of your KPIs that has changed, that's affected the decisions that you're making. So I would say you need to pivot from the project when you've done the needful to know that the direction that you're going in is no longer going to actually achieve the goal that you thought it would achieve. And I want to add a caveat that You have to actually make sure you've put in that work to know whether or not it will, have the expectation that you kind of desire. Sometimes we may get discouraged from the project or the task that we're working on just because we want to run into a blocker. Every blocker doesn't require a change of direction. Sometimes it just requires more energy and focus in that same direction until you can break through any walls or barriers that you're expecting or you're experiencing. But there definitely is time, or there is a great reason to pivot sometimes. I remember going to the AWS summit that took place over the summer in New York, and I was talking to one of I think the developer experience table from AWS, and we were discussing the financing, or I would say not financing. There is some AWS credits that are available for startups, and I can't remember the exact number. I think they have a free tier, but then they also have like $1,000 for startups, and then they also were offering like $200,000 additional inside of for AWS credits that could be available if you are building some AI company. And I was talking to the representative from that table. We were talking about, hey, you know, how I kind of asked him, what would it take for me to get that funding or those credits, and then he was just going on about, the process, what I needed to do, the different steps on how you would go from step one to step two, step three, for those different tiers of credits. And he was like, hey, if once you get to 200,000, they do kind of block you from getting any more credits. But he was saying if you haven't figured out a way for your business to generate revenue at that point, then you really do need to pivot. And that's a really good, that's a really good suggestion, because if you're burning a significant amount of capital and you're not finding any way to monetize the business model that you have, and I wouldn't even call it a business model at that point, but if it's not working and you've put in a lot of effort and energy to do it and it's still not working, then yes, it makes sense to pivot at that point.
How does H-1B visa changes affect the market?
So I have seen some of the stories inside of the news about, the H1B1 visa or H1B visa. I say H1B1. I was thinking COVID, but the H1B visa, I believe, and the changes that have gone for those applications. And just to highlight, I think they added like another extra $100,000 for new applications, and that has the potential, and definitely is going to box out smaller companies, but it may have the potential to disrupt some of the new hiring for larger companies that do rely on foreign talent in their businesses. And so it could have an impact on the hiring available for software engineers. I spoke to a buddy of mine recently, and we were discussing who are the beneficiaries of that visa, and because I kind of wanted to understand what exactly does it mean for developers. I see that a lot of the companies that are hiring with that visa are, your big tech companies. We're talking Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and the like. And they are the ones that honestly can afford to even absorb the changes in the policy for that visa. So I don't know if it'll affect their hiring too much. I think Meta was one spent over a million, maybe $1 million on some talent, on some developers at some point. They are between OpenAI and Meta. They are on track to spend $1 billion to hire developers. So an extra $100,000, I don't think it's going to have a really large impact on their hiring decisions. But yes, it does change the way smaller tech companies or smaller companies that are looking for tech talent are going to be, you know, going into finding that talent. I don't know what that'll look like for the availability of job openings. Um, I have seen some stats recently from I won't say recently, because that data is on hold right now due to the shutdown. But from last month, the data that was released last month for the previous month, was showing that we're like 1-to-1. There's a 1-to-1 ratio, for job openings to job seekers, and so that is a very large change from where we were right after COVID, when there were a significantly higher number of openings per seeker. And so what we're seeing now, and then even going into 2022, 2023, when I think there were more seekers than openings at that time, because there was a slowdown and there were a lot of layoffs at the time. And so now we're kind of getting into a more, more equilibrium. And, policy changes like the visa cost and fees might have an impact. And there are, say, a couple 100,000, maybe 1 million employees or potential employees that are affected by that change. But I don't know how significant that change will be for the majority of tech workers that are looking for roles right now. So I'm still going to keep an eye out and just, see, if there are more roles becoming available. But I would still say the amount of competition for those roles has not changed much. But it is an interesting, effort that the administration is or has made to try to domesticate more of those tech roles. Because honestly, there has been, I would even say, another reason why I don't think it's super effective is when you look at some of the Fortune 500 companies that are even hiring right now. I'm seeing a lot of them are hiring in other countries and regions anyway. So for this policy to be effective, the jobs actually have to be in the U.S. anyway. If they're not out here, then there's even less of an impact than what I was explaining before. But yeah, I wonder if that'll actually shift the employers to start hiring domestically, or will it just shift them to, increase their efforts to hire offshore resources. But it's something I'm gonna keep an eye on over the next few months and definitely into 2026.
How do I find companies that are hiring?
So when looking for companies that are hiring right now, I don't always keep an eye on the job boards. Usually, when you're looking on job boards, everyone's looking on the job board. So again, going back to competition, there are a lot of people looking and there's a lot of people there, so it's going to get swamped very quickly. Um, I do look on, let's say there's a news story about some company that's doing something big in M&A. I will take a look at their careers website just because as a I learned this from consulting. When there's a lot of change in a business, there's an opportunity for new hires. At that point, you may be spinning up a new business unit or there's something may be shutting down. And sometimes that moment might require a lot of engineering resources to get the goal to the finish line. And so I think recently Compass had purchased one of their competitors' business. And that acquisition and merger makes it much more likely that they're going to need developers to actually, make sure the technology is integrated correctly. And so at that point, I looked on their careers website so that they were hiring a lot of developer and engineering roles. You may see other things in the media about companies making really big swings or they're getting new contracts, releasing a new product line. When you see things like that for a business, that is great times and a great opportunity to look at the careers website, see what they're actually hiring for, and make your attempt to get inside of that company. And then you could also, just see what products are gaining in popularity around you. The businesses that are more successful are going to invest inside of their business. They're going to want to increase their product lines. They're going to want to optimize certain areas of their business. If they're doing a good job, they're going to reinvest that money into the business. That's always clear. So look for the companies that you're seeing that are doing better. Those are the areas and the opportunities where you'll find more roles available.
How do I get started as a software engineer in 2025?
So in 2025, I would say the best way to get started as a software engineer is to get a computer science degree. I know a lot of people talk about boot camps, and I do feel like that is a great way to get your foot in the door and at least to get a basic understanding of tech and what's the things that are going on in tech. But I have found that when you're thinking about, especially for hyperscalers and the companies that are doing more engineering intensive projects, when you go through a boot camp, it doesn't give you the fundamentals you need to actually solve some of the problems you're gonna face in a large company or in a regulated environment, because it's not always just about knowing what the code says. Sometimes you need to understand the underlying networking that is driving the product. You need to understand security. You need to understand the data structures that you're working with, maybe relationships. If you don't have a good understanding of data and how to model data or how to make decisions based on the data that you're looking at, or even how to structure the data. Maybe it's not just a schema, but do I need an array or do I need a set versus a map? having that foundation, which is, every CS student is going to take a data structures class. They're going to take a data algorithms class. And those classes will teach you the very basics you need to understand a lot of the data that you're going to use in practice. You'll understand the time complexity of the algorithms that you're building. You'll understand the memory usage of the algorithms that you're creating. I'm not totally sure in a boot camp do you get that same uh, fundamental support, although you will understand how to write code. You will understand how to create the website. You will understand a lot of the things that you need to do to just do the task and accomplish the goal when you get your foot in the door. But there are some challenges that will be more difficult to overcome if you have not gotten that background knowledge. So I know there's been a little bit of worry for some graduates and students that are like, with AI creating or being able to write code, is there even any value in a software engineering degree or certification anymore? And I would still say yes. There are plenty of things that AI is good at, and there are many more things that you do require a human intelligence to take care of. Now, getting your CS degree gives you the background that you need to actually, supplement, or to actually let AI supplement your skills in the most effective way. And that's definitely going to be for web development. Definitely when we get into AI and AI engineering from a machine learning and a generative AI standpoint. But especially when we get into physical AI and robotics, a lot of the people that are building on the cutting edge of AI and technology and robotics are master's degree holders. They're PhDs. They have really advanced education that is giving them a advantage versus someone who's just coming in with a boot camp certification that they've done, Java development or web development for the last 90 days or even 6 months or even a year. That heavy research, working on research projects with some of the greatest theoretical minds in technology, it's really hard to compete with that if you don't go the CS route.
How can I use AI to be a 10x engineer?
So, first of all, when we're talking about a 10x engineer, I think that term is kind of overused in YouTube and social media, and I say social media including LinkedIn, Instagram, everything. People kind of overuse that term to the point where I always ask, hey, do you know what that even means? What is a 1X engineer? What is your actual goal, a job as a software engineer? A lot of people lose that and then start talking about how can I be a 10X engineer. You have to first be a 1X engineer. You have to do the job that you've been hired for. And so when you're a developer, your job is to, yes, solve problems. And yes, solve problems with technology. And yes, use software to solve problems in building, designing, testing, and maintaining the technology that you're building. But at the end of the day, your job when you're working inside of a company is to drive business, is to help the business grow. So that means saving money, or that means creating more opportunities to increase the amount of revenue that the business makes. So when we're thinking about a 10x engineer, it needs to be less about your technical skills and definitely more about your ability to connect the things you're doing from a technical perspective to a business objective. How are you connecting the fact that you're adding more automated tests to the business strategy to improve customer satisfaction over the next quarter? How is the fact that um, you're adding more infrastructure as code into your project, and so that you have a foundation that you can use to audit the the resources your application is using, so that you can maybe save more money in cloud spending over the next 12 to 18 months. You have to be able to connect the project or the ticket or task that you're working on today to some type of strategic goal that the company has, and it may be at the level right above you. And if we want to talk about X or X's, right? At the 1X is you're a developer that is, solving the problem at your level. You're writing the code, you're testing the application, you're, running some type of script. Let's say 2X is you're solving the problem from your manager's perspective, the person who is responsible for getting this quarterly goal out the door. And that quarterly goal might still be really technical, right? It might be getting the test, migrating the testing suite to some other technology, from Mocha to something else. Or it might be getting the or migrating your Java legacy application to Golang. Or it might be migrating your legacy on-premises applications and systems to the cloud. That's a very technical still level. That might be your manager, it might be like your skip manager right above them. But even beyond that, there is a goal for why we're migrating this technology from here to there. Maybe it's something to do with the operating costs. Maybe the business is trying to expand to different regions, and right now we only having one data center that is in Florida is holding us back from scaling our stores inside of to California the way we need it to be scaled, because we're seeing a lot of latency between the data center and any new stores in that area. And so we can't actually add new stores, because any new store we add is actually increasing the amount of latency we're seeing at the existing stores, which is going to eventually start degrading the service we can provide to our customers. So when we're thinking about a 10x engineer, we have to think about the actual dollars and cents that the code we're writing is starting to impact. And when you use AI, and AI is a great way to help you write the code, it can be a great way to help you organize your ideas. It can be a great way to help you make connections between something technical and business related. Like, let's say you're trying to understand what impact your technical decisions has made over the last quarter. You have a list of the tickets that you've worked on, and you have a one-pager for your business's quarterly strategy or the yearly strategy, 5-year strategy, something like that, or even a transcript from the last all hands that your CEO or CTO was speaking at. Or even if you're in a publicly traded company, some of those investor documents are going to be gold for you to understand, hey, where is the business kind of thinking about going in the future? All of that is usually public. If it's not public, it should be somewhere in the company's internal Wikipedia. But maybe you ask AI, hey, how is this task or these tasks helping the business to do this? And it might be helping the business in some specific area of the strategy, right? Because you might have a multi-pronged strategy at your company, but you have to understand what specific leg is this task, directly impacting. And so AI can help you do that. It can help you to, I guess I would say coding is the lowest hanging fruit that AI helps you to do. Writing code has never been a significant blocker for the success of a technical project. Writing code, even before AI, I was copying. Yes, you have to rewrite any code snippet you find, but all of the code that AI, ChatGPT, Cursor is writing, you could have found that on Reddit or Stack Overflow 10 years ago. The code was there. Or, a lot of projects have, all of them don't have great documentation, but you can find some type of good documentation with examples that you can use to write the code. So writing the code has not been a significant blocker, ever. Maybe you definitely can write the code faster because of that search. Sometimes you'll find the answer on like the 11th page, but if you have to go through all 10 pages, yes, from a time saving perspective, AI written code is much better. But if you're writing code without understanding the code that you're writing and the architecture and decision making behind why that code is better than some other alternative, then you're going to spend that time in the future because you're going to have to solve and redo some of the work that you've already done because you may have used AI to write code that you didn't even need. And so imagine you're writing more code faster, but 80% of that code you didn't need in the first place. So that's going to start to degrade the quality of the products that you're working on anyway. So I would think about using AI and becoming a 10x engineer as like a two-pronged approach. There's two sides to the approach that you want to think about. Think about how do I be a 10x engineer, and that means driving business goals, not just technical changes. And how do I use AI to drive business goals? And that can sometimes be writing code. That can sometimes be translating the impact of something you're doing in the code to something that's happening from a strategic level. Or that could be organizing information in an effective way that people in the finance business unit are understanding what's going on in the engineering business unit, and then that also makes it clear or is available to people in HR or the people unit so that everyone's kind of on the same page and no information is being lost. So think about that when you're making your goals and seeking to be better. And so I also wanted to add, I saw a video this week from a gentleman that was talking about, he was talking about a Yoruba proverb, which said that the blacksmith's child plays with fire. And when I thought about that, right? The blacksmith's child plays with fire. The first response or reaction that I would think is, most people would say children or anyone should not be playing with fire. But when we're talking about the blacksmith, their very job and nature of their job their skill set is built in being able to understand how and when to use fire to solve their problems or to, create value, to create things in this world. So the child of that skilled worker is going to inherit the abilities and the understanding of how and when. And I thought that was amazing the way the guy had kind of discussed it. But it also made me think about, for those of us that are in the world where fire is valuable, fire is used to build the tools that we kind of rely on, then the blacksmith and their bloodline and their family who understands how to use fire is at a significant advantage over everyone else who may not have those skills. But one, they don't always they're at an advantage, but that advantage can definitely be I would say we can catch up. For everyone who was not the child of a blacksmith who still needs to understand how to master fire, there's an opportunity for you to learn and become a master so that you can create on the same level as the people who have been doing it for a little bit longer or who grew up in it. It does require a little bit more energy and a little bit more effort on your part. But when the resource that is driving progress in the culture in the world, and what I'm thinking about is technology, software. Software is one aspect of it, but we're also talking about hardware now when we get into AI and physical AI and automation and the things that are being automated all over the world, in warehouses, in restaurants. At some point, you will start seeing automated trash collection. I know right now there are trucks that, there's a human driver that drives the truck. I think the trash cans can get picked up from an arm on the truck. And these types of changes that are happening, the people who grew up knowing what software was, knowing how to program a computer, knowing the different components of a computer, they're at a significant advantage versus everyone else who, there are a lot of people who right now are afraid of AI. That is a very dangerous way to enter the world, especially if you're a child or you're a young person who's thinking that AI is just going to take your job. It's less about AI taking your job and more about, do you know how to use the resources that are going to be necessary and going to be the most powerful for the next generation. I think that's going to be really important to keep in mind because, a lot of us did not grow up with that type of those resources, that type of knowledge around us and in our household, the conversations about how to use technology. And I want to make sure that we're not in that same perspective and predicament now, where we're not in conversations or we're not having conversations with our family members and our people about, hey, how do we use AI in this new modality of software and technology to actually drive the culture. So we need to start being a part of those conversations and a part of the groups that are actually building things and understanding how the things that we're relying on are being built. Because if we don't have that, we're going to be at a significant disadvantage from now and even ongoing. But with resources like Kwork University, with resources like myself and my peers, I'm sure we're going to make sure that the next generation has all of the tools and resources that they need to live lives filled with sovereignty, love, and adventure. So let's continue to research, let's continue to build, let's continue to make a great impact, a positive impact with the technology that we're using. So with that, everyone, enjoy the rest of your week. Have a great day, and I wish you all the best.